Oh, hold up. How's my helmet here? Hey, how's it? I'm Dan, dabbler of a lot of things, master of none. I'm here at Manchester Wall on this beautiful early October day, and usually when I'm here it's to rock climb, but right over there is the river, where we've got Belle Isle and Browns Island, a couple of famous Civil War sites that a good while ago I made a video about off-road boarding there with my one wheel and my mountain board. That video chronicled a big fall that I took that ultimately messed up my toe and my shoulder for a long time, and unfortunately shattered the little bit of confidence that I had been building during that time as I was getting into off-road boarding. So that, coupled with a podcast that I did around the same time about why I ultimately decided to give up my one wheel and not invest in a new motorized board, ultimately led me to go on a bit of an off-road boarding hiatus for the past couple years. As I turn my attention to other kinds of adventuring, like all the climbing I've been doing that you can see on my channel, though I fully intended to get back on my mountain board at some point, it got to that point where if I have something that's sitting collecting dust for long enough, I start getting that itch and that urge to get rid of it and make room for something new. And like I said in my original video where I was comparing motorized off-road boarding to my newly acquired mountain board, my biggest hang up with mountain boarding is, at least at my skill level, the inability to control my speed and only been able to use it downhill. Obviously having the one wheel negated that issue because I could just take the one wheel up the hill and then take the mountain board down. But once I sold my old one wheel before it was completely obsolete and unusable, I knew deep down that I probably wasn't going to be super motivated to get back on the mountain board unless I motorized it. So this past summer I gave myself an ultimatum. I was either going to convert my mountain board to a motorized e-board, or I was going to get rid of it. And it's pretty obvious the choice that I made. Now, the reason that I wanted to stick with my mountain board deck and not go with a pre-built e-board that I've seen advertised on the internet, of course, and I've seen people riding them here and there, is the bindings. I looked pretty thoroughly and I could not find a longboard e-board that had bindings. And if you're in this world at all, I'm sure you've seen the videos of all these amazing daredevil professionals that can ollie a board like that, or those incredible one-wheelers that could ollie their one wheels, some of them without even having like those flight fin things that they could hook their feet under. But that just ain't me, probably never going to be. Like I said, I dabble in a lot of things that I enjoy, but I am a master at none. So for me, keeping the bindings was non-negotiable, not just for stability, but also to be able to ollie. I still want to be able to jump tree roots and curbs and stuff like that. Though after my accident, I'm not sure if I'll ever go back and try it at a skate park again. Also, being somewhat of a tinkerer, I was pretty confident that I could handle a DIY upgrade conversion as opposed to just buying something that's already pre-built. So I reached out to a couple e-board companies that I found on Google. One of them got back to me, mboards, and I got to give the hugest props, the deepest gratitude to Jacob from mboards, as he very patiently explained to a noob like me early on, there is no manual, there's no script when it comes to DIY e-board conversion and upgrading. So again, he was super patient with me, helping me get all the parts that I need, working with me on my idiosyncrasies about what I wanted to do with the board and how I wanted to use it. And he was so gracious and so generous with his time. He spent hours helping me through this process. We did Zoom calls and stuff where he walked me through how to put it together. But not just that, he explained to me how it all worked and why. And he did all of that, insisting that I couldn't compensate him for that time. Honestly, I can't recommend mboards enough for this experience. So as you can see, there were three main components to this. There's the control box, the sort of hub that controls the power and communicates with everything. That's powered, of course, by the battery that I had to mount in the middle of the board. And then there's the motors. And those are all the pieces that I got from mboards, which Jacob walked me through the manual install of. But I was still able to keep my deck, of course, and my wheels, but mount them to a more conducive set of trucks. It's all controlled with this little flipski remote. And honestly, that was my biggest hesitation about doing this kind of e-board for the longest time, was that because I started with a one wheel and it had the sensors in the pressure plates, I just loved being able to communicate with it via my body and not have to use a remote. But ultimately, now that I've been doing it a little bit, I've gotten used to it. So far with the expectedly busy fall that I've had, I've only really been able to jaunt around my neighborhood on it a little bit. I've actually found some cool little trails that I didn't know were there, but I had the day off today. It's an absolutely gorgeous day, and I wanted to give my upgraded, converted board a little bit more of a christening. So I thought I'd return to the scene of the crime of my previous video of the Belle Isle mountain bike park area and back at the Bryan Park hill, which were two areas that I found particularly challenging when I was on an unmotorized mountain board. So I wanted to see how it is now with a motor. So let's go take a ride and we'll check back in after and see how things go. I'm not afraid to die, 'cause Oh dear. Right behind me is Browns Island. Saw the wallows there last summer. And then directly across the street is the new amphitheater, Allianz at Riverfront. And you can see my concert highlight shorts of everybody from Lamb of God to Weird Al from this past summer. Looks like I'm not the only one enjoying this beautiful day. I'd heard there was some climbing anchors set up at Belle Isle, but I never knew where they were. I think I found it. Might be a video coming of those pretty soon.
Oh yeah, this is where my band did an early photo shoot.
All right, haven't been back here since that other video a couple years ago where I had the unmotorized mountain board. So let's try it out. So it's a couple days later after I recorded that first part of the video. I fully intended to get to Bryan Park that day, but I just ran out of time. But now I am here at Bryan Park in Richmond, Virginia, where just like Belle Isle, the last time I was here was to Mountainboard on this hill right behind me. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's the biggest hill that we got in the area. And the reason that I wanted to give Belle Isle and Bryan Park a go again, now that I've got the e-board set up, is because of the different terrain. Because that Belle Isle pump track was all dirt and everything was super narrow because it's obviously intended for mountain biking. But here I got this wide open space, big grassy hill, and what I'm more interested in trying here is some carving. So I'm going to do that and then check out some of the trails here, which I tried on my one wheel long time ago, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So let's see, we got right or left? Right looks like it goes more into a clearing. Left goes into the unknown. Into the unknown. Let's do that one. That counts as an ollie, right? So I was going to do my little follow-up segment at Bryan Park, but if the other day was beautiful, today it was absolutely gorgeous, and it was like no clouds in the sky, no humidity, so everybody was out. I kept getting in the middle of Frisbee golf games, there was soccer, birthday parties, everybody was out walking, so I couldn't find a quiet place to sit down and do this anyway. So I decided to come home and wrap this up in my backyard and also get a hat because the helmet hair was way worse today. So all I can say at this point is I am so glad that I spent that money and took the time and built my own e-board, because though I still stand by all my justifications and rationalizations for getting rid of not just my one wheel but also like my electric drum kit, which you can hear more about in that podcast that I mentioned earlier. Ever since I did get rid of my one wheel, which I bought in the first place because I didn't have readily available access to the ocean and to surfing, and the one wheel turned out to be the next best thing, especially since I'm not a skateboarder by trade or from having growing up doing it or anything. The one wheel was just like the perfect middle ground between surfing and skateboarding for me at my skill level, where I was able to just jump on it and go and zoom around and carve, but also go off-road and challenge myself with that a little bit. So I definitely missed it since I've gotten rid of it. I just couldn't justify both philosophically or economically getting a new one. But like I said, I'm so glad that I ventured into this DIY e-skate world because I am so hooked now. I had so much freaking fun on this thing. Even though it doesn't as smoothly carve and pivot on a dime like the one wheel does, especially on rougher ground like gravel and grass. On asphalt at least, the carving was still pretty tight, so no complaints there. As you saw, they haven't cut the grass for a while on that hill, so it made carving pretty arduous on that downhill, so I just gave up on that pretty quickly anyway. I remember the one wheel handling that kind of stuff better because it just has a wider surface area with the wheel, and even with my knobby Mountainboard tires, it just had a hard time traversing that super thick, arduous grass. However, now that I have motors on that board, I don't need to worry about it only being used downhill. And as expected and experienced with the one wheel, having motors not only to control speed, but also get extra speed when you need it was such a major revelation. I remember, and you can see in my previous video on Belle Isle, that some of those incline jumps I could barely get over, even though I was going as fast as I could muster just with the downhill momentum. But now, as I felt the board slowing down at the top, I was able to just give it a little extra juice, and I was able to zip right over them, no problem. Not to mention not having to walk back uphill just so I can go back downhill was so miraculous. Except, depending on the terrain, like the dirt at Belle Isle pump track and the grass going up the hill at Bryan Park, the wheels just spun out because they didn't have any traction. That's just a lesson that we all know too well. No matter what man tries to do, nature will always win in the end. I had my first wipeout on this board, ironically going uphill, and I really don't know what happened. I don't know if I hit something that threw me off, or like I suspect more likely, I was putting a lot of extra power into the motors, trying to nudge myself up the hill, and I kept spinning out in the grass, and I might have just let my finger off the motor power and it just stopped me suddenly, which was something I'm gonna have to get used to, because I've noticed on smoother terrain, like asphalt and tightly packed gravel, that if I let off suddenly on the remote, there's still a gradual roll, but because there's so much resistance, like in that tall grass, if I let my finger off, the board would just stop. So that's probably what threw me. But I also feel like it's kind of a rite of passage to have a spill on a new or upgraded board, so you just kind of get that out of your system and hopefully learn from it. Doing a little bit of off-road trail riding again was so fun. I remember the last time that I did that at Bryan Park, and just in general with the trail riding that I did on the one wheel, I was always just a little too unsure of myself with the balance just being right under my feet as opposed to the wheels on the outside of the board. I know this is a me problem and a confidence thing because I've seen plenty of footage of hobbyists like me, but also pros that compete in those one-wheel competitions where it's all like super steep downhill mountain bike tracks that they are just like flying down with no problem. But for me, and I know this is a real thing because I've heard other people talk about it too, the one-wheel wobble was always a bit of an issue for me, especially when I take it off-road. I know a lot of people complain about the wobble on the road doing super fast speeds, but I'm not a speed demon. I was never comfortable with giving myself the opportunity to hit the pavement going like 30 miles an hour. So the wobbling at top speeds was never the issue for me. It was when I'd be like going over tree roots or rocks or uneven pavement or something like that, and the board would just kind of hit at a weird angle when it went over an obstacle, and it would toss me and I'd have to do that running stop at the end. Like I said, this is a me thing. This is more of a confidence and skill level thing, but having the wheels on the outside of the board and having 4 of them as opposed to 1, I just was like flying over tree roots and stuff and traversing around obstacles, and it was like smooth as butter. Like I didn't even notice. It was awesome. I never felt wobbly or like I was going to get thrown, or I'd hit something and I was super off balance and I have to right myself. And that really has nothing to do with the Esk8 side of things. That's just the Mountainboard. And also, as I suspected, having those bindings really made a difference. I just felt more stable and locked in and really just able to control the board better because my feet not only were bound to the board, but also because they were at the correct hip width distance, as opposed to like the one wheel. If I wanted to get that same bound connection to the board, I'd have to slip them under the flight fins, and then they were all close together, and that was just kind of awkward. But the fact that I was able to even do trails like that on a mountain board like this without having to go to the mountains to find downhill tracks and trails was just so awesome. So as expected, but now I can confirm from my own experience that a DIY converted mountain board is the best of both worlds when it comes to my experience of Esk8. I loved my one wheel and I had so much fun on it, but I feel like I can do most anything that I did on that one wheel and more. But more so though, what really excites me about this DIY thing as opposed to the pre-packaged thing like a one wheel, which I know has lots of options for upgrading and altering and everything, though they're really weird about it because they're always like, if you do any of those things, you replace the hub, you replace the rails, the pressure plates, whatever, you know, you void your warranty and we can't fix it for you. Even though there is a whole DIY culture and market out there for the one wheel, still the company is very, dare I say, kind of fascist about how they want you to consume their product and use their product. And I talk about this a lot more in that podcast episode I keep mentioning, but that's a big reason that I moved away from a company like Apple too. I just don't like how tightly they want to control the user experience, but also the user's ability to create their own experience with their products. I know most people prefer, and I respect the ease and lack of general anxiety that comes with the whole plug-and-play product lines when it comes to modern technology and all of our technological toys and things. I totally get that not everybody wants to have like an engineering degree to be able to use and enjoy their technological products in their everyday lives. I get that. And I also don't believe that any corporation has our best interests in mind. Bottom line is what they're looking for, and I get that too. So I'm not saying that like this one mega conglomerate is better than this other one just because I like their products better or something. They're all what they are, and to me they're all equally liable for the quality and lack thereof a lot of times of their products. And I think it is a little bit weird to have loyalty to like one company over another as if one actually cares about you more than another one, because they don't. They care about our money. That's why, as much as I loved my one wheel and having access to an e-board in general, once I saw the end of the lifespan quickly approaching with my older version of a one wheel, the last thing I wanted to do was get caught in that upgrade culture, just like you have to do with Apple products where you can't upgrade components of the thing. They just want you to get rid of the old thing and get the newest thing for exorbitant amounts of money, I might add. Now with this DIY built e-board that isn't specific to one company, it's just parts sourced from a bunch of different places, I can upgrade when I want to, I can repair as I need to, and I'm not beholden to one company and the way they want me to consume their product. Also, as much as I love the One Wheel app and the way you were able to track like, you know, your rides and your progress and share and do group meetups and stuff like that. That stuff was all great, but I really didn't like having the firmware and OS fascism that all of these big tech companies put upon us, where like, you know, the almighty algorithm is what is in charge of our hardware. My board is custom programmed with an open source app that isn't subject to an OS that is in charge of the functionality of it and all that stuff. And on that note, the battery on this thing was incredible. Both the remote and the battery, after all
the riding that I did the past couple days, and I didn't charge it after I got home the other day. I just wanted to see how much battery would be left after I did this whole video's worth of riding. More than 50%. And though, yes, I know it's an older version, but I would have had to charge my One Wheel Plus, even with the Ego backup battery that I had installed on it, several times with all the riding that I just did the past couple days. And that was my biggest area of anxiety and concern when I would go on a ride by myself or with a group ride. The whole time I'd be, checking the app, how much battery do I have left? When's that Ego gonna kick in? Am I gonna be able to make it back to my car? Am I gonna have to carry this board for a few miles? And that's because I was able to select the battery that met my needs for this build, as opposed to it just being whatever came with the product, like it does with One Wheel. I'm not trying to dog on One Wheel at all. Like I said, I loved my One Wheel. I think it's an awesome product. It's more of the business practices and philosophies of these companies that doesn't work for me. And that's why, unsurprisingly, the DIY way to go was the way to go for me. So thank you so much for coming on this ride with me and watching this. Now that I got my board life up and running again, hopefully I'll be making some more content around that in the near future. But in the meantime, please feel free to check out my playlist of all my other adventuring exploits and shenanigans that is on my channel. And until next time, see you out there.